Vincent Randazzo. I'm the Superintendent of Schools. On behalf of the Board of Education, welcome to the Stephen L. Foster Auditorium. I just want to take a moment to say thank you so much for coming out this evening. The school district, along with the Island Park Village, are happy to co-host this event so that the community can learn more about the proposed wind farm and obviously how the community can get a little bit more involved. Before we get started this evening, I'm just going to ask everyone to rise so we can say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. You can be seated. So again, this evening's community forum is being co-hosted by the school district and the village of Island Park. So now I'd like to introduce Mayor Michael McGinty to say a few words. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'd like to just first take the opportunity for thanking the Island Park School District for joining us in this undertaking, particularly the cooperation we received from our superintendent, Vincent Randazzo. Please give him a hand. We're here tonight to listen to the Equinor wind energy people. The meeting is informational in context. I hope that we can use this time to, well, familiarize ourselves with the process and get a clear understanding of where it is they would like to go. This is part of the New York State Article 7 permitting process. And in light of that, I trust that we will continue to see a transparency and day-to-day effort by Equinor to be sure that we're comfortable with what they propose. Again, it's informational. So is Susan here? Susan, would you please? Thank you, everybody.
All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you, Superintendent Randazzo and Mayor McGinty, for that warm introduction. It's always a pleasure to join you in everything that we do here around the community. On behalf of the Equinor team, I want to thank you all for coming out this evening to learn about the Empire Wind Project and to share your thoughts with our team. Of course, I want to thank everyone for their support in making this event happen tonight. So Mayor McGinty and the village trustees, Superintendent Randazzo and Assistant Superintendent Offerman Celentano, and the Island Park School Board and the Village of Island Park trustees are all here tonight, so thank you all. I wanted to thank Dr. Bruce Hoffman, who is the principal here at this school, for hosting us and for being so supportive and helpful in all the planning that went into this evening. And I'd also like to acknowledge that we have with us this evening Senator-elect Patricia Canizeri Fitzpatrick. We also have Mayor Francis Murray. Mayor Francis Murray of Rockville Center. And we have a representative from Councilman D'Esposito's office and also a representative from NYSERDA here with us this evening. Just a few more thank yous. I want to extend great thanks to Arch Street Communications, who has been our partner throughout this process for planning this evening and making sure that everything was set up. We have Tiger Stripe Media here this evening, who will be recording the event. And later we'll have that available on the Empire Wind website for anyone who was not able to make it. And then I'd like to thank Helen Dorado Alessi and Diana Panaranda from the Long Beach Latino Civic Association. They have been instrumental for us to translate this presentation and to be here tonight to do live interpretation for anyone who needs it. If anyone needs it and doesn't have it, please see the registration table and they'll get you set up with a headset. Okay, so let's get started. Next slide. And Tiger Stripe Media is going to be advancing our slides. So to start, I want to start off with a safety moment. First, I'd like to note that the emergency exits are in the back of the room and along the sides here. And we also have a first aid kit available at the registration table if anyone needs it. As we go through this presentation, you'll see that Equinor is deep-rooted in its core values and its safety culture. And we have to be, right? We're working offshore and along transmission cables, which can be very dangerous. And it requires an extreme amount of caution and safety. But safety is really all around us. It's throughout our office culture. It's in all of our meetings. It's how the stakeholder team is engaging with the community, and it's how we lead thoughtful discussions on the Empire Wind project. So to ensure safety is front and center in all we do, we start everything with a safety moment. And tonight, that safety moment is for a thoughtful discussion. So I ask for all your support in our community agreement. Just a few pointers here to step up and step back, which means if you're shy, challenge yourself to share. And if you talk a lot, challenge yourself to give others space. We want to hear from everyone. I ask that everyone's respectful of others' opinions, and we speak one person at a time. This is not only for respect, but it's to ensure that we capture all your insights. And of course, this is meant to be interactive, so please contribute. Next. Okay, so the agenda for this evening, we will introduce the Equinor team that has joined us. We will explore offshore wind for Long Island, and we will hear from one of Long Island's greatest advocates for our environment. Adrienne Esposito is here from Citizens Campaign for the Environment, and she'll share a little bit about the transition to offshore wind. We will provide an overview of the Empire Wind project and take a look at the permitting process and how to be involved. And then we have some exciting news to share. And then we're going to have some time for a thoughtful discussion with everyone. So everyone who, when you arrived, you got an index card. So I ask that throughout the presentation, if you have a question, comment, something pops to mind, write it down on your card. And then towards the end of the presentation, someone will go around and from our team and we'll be collecting those cards. And then we'll use them to guide the discussion. I do anticipate that we'll have quite a few questions. So please know that we have them all with us after the presentation. And if your name, contact information is on there, we will reach out to follow up afterwards if we didn't have time for your question. And then finally, after the presentation and discussion, the members of our team, who you'll meet in just a second, will be outside around the room at various subject matter stations for you to go and ask your questions, speak more one-on-one about the project, and learn more about the various aspects. Okay, so with that, I want to have our team do some introductions. We do have a great team with us tonight, both from our external partners of researchers and consultants and our internal Equinor team. The team represents a wide range of expertise, including community engagement, right-of-way, permitting, fisheries and wildlife, supply chain, engineering. So let's take a minute, and I want to have them introduce themselves and share where their expertise is and also where they will be stationed when we go to the open house. And I suppose I could start with myself. Sorry, everyone. I'm Susan Leno. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Long Island with Equinor. My focus is engaging the Long Island communities and building partnerships across our projects here on Long Island.
Perfect, and I'll go next. I'm Harrison Foyer. I'm the New York Director of Public Affairs for Equinor. I'm a lifelong Long Islander, and I work with Susan supporting our efforts across the state of New York. And I'd like to pass it around our team who's in the front rows, and you'll get to speak with them in detail at the end of the presentation, but I want to give it to Greg next.
Good evening, everybody. Greg Hastings, construction manager with Equinor. I'm responsible for all of the onshore construction from where our cables come into Long Beach to our point of interconnection, and I'll be at the technical aspects of offshore wind poster after the event.
Hi, I'm Ben Hughes. I'm an electrical engineer for Equinor, and I'm looking after the substation design, and I'll also be at the technical aspects poster.
Good evening. My name is Turi Tormodsen. So I'm the project manager for the substation delivery. I'll be standing at the technical poster later. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Carrie Ann Soto. I will be doing community engagement work with Susan and Harrison. I'm also a lifelong Long Islander and looking forward to working in the community, getting to know everybody.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anna Røstem, and I am Safety, Security, and Sustainability Manager in the project.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Stephen Mark from Model Law Group. I'm here in connection with our interfacing with the local municipalities. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Dylan Corbett. I'm an environmental consultant engaged in federal and state permitting and assisting Equinor and everything that entails. And I'll be also up at the front taking questions on permitting.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Kotz. I'm an electrical engineer with Exponent.
Hello, good evening. Hi, I'm Eva Land. I'm a federal permit manager, and I'll be over here on the left table to answer any questions about birds, bats, and wildlife.
Hello, I'm Sue Davis, and I'm an onshore permitting manager with Equinor, and I will be at the permitting station during the open house.
Hi everyone, I'm Harriet Green. I'm the operations manager for these projects. I'm responsible for preparing for the long-term operations, including workforce development. So I will be at the workforce development poster at the back of the room here to my right.
Thank you. I'm Steve Drew. I have been a recreational fisherman and a commercial fisherman and been working as a fisheries consultant for Equinor for about 4 years.
Hi everybody, Emil Yeset. I work as commercial manager for the project, and I'll be over at the right-of-way section in the back over there.
Hi everyone, Sal Camone. I'm also part of the commercial team, and I'll be in the back as well on the right of way.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to my team for being here tonight to support this evening and to support the community to be here for their questions. Before I turn things over to Harrison, who's going to kick off with a discussion about offshore wind for Long Island, I wanted to share a short video about the work Equinor is doing around the globe and here in New York.
What does repowering America mean? It means creating a just transition for workers and new careers in the energy industry of the future. It means investing in innovation and technology to once again spur manufacturing in the United States. And it means working with communities to ensure the full potential of this new energy source is met. The world needs climate solutions now, and Equinor is ready to lead the way. Our values shape how we engage with society and coexist with others. An international leader in energy, Equinor is building renewable and low-carbon energy solutions around the world. Our Empire Wind and Beacon Wind projects will power millions of homes with renewable energy produced off the northeastern shores of the United States. We don't have time to wait. Equinor is leading the way towards creating a renewable energy sector right here in America right now. Equinor, shaping the future of energy to get there together.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Susan. It's so good to be here in the Village of Island Park tonight. And as you see, we have a whole team of experts here ready to really get into a comprehensive dialogue with everyone to answer your questions. And for every question we can't answer tonight, we want your contact information. We want to make sure that you know that we're accessible to you, and we want to answer every question you have about these projects. So I want to keep it brief because tonight's an opportunity to hear from you, and we have enough, and to make sure we have enough time to go through a high-level overview of our project and get to those questions and thoughts. So I want to start with the global of Equinor, and we're going to bring it down to the local right here in Island Park. So about Equinor as a whole, we're a broad energy company that's oil and gas as well as renewables. that's headquartered in Norway, and it's been in the United States since the 1980s. And just a few months back, we were so excited to open our first office in New York, which is in Brooklyn. So we have 20,000 employees around the world, and this map gives a good view of the scale of our commitments in the US, as well as our global ambitions. Could we go to the next slide, please? So first and foremost, we recognize the opportunity that the offshore wind industry has to put more into the community than just power into the grid. So that's why, in addition to being on the ground in the village of Island Park, and an island park that's not part of the incorporated village, our company values drive our community-based development model and inform our commitments for how we work with local communities. We put a priority on being open and collaborative, and we work with it always in mind, and that how we deliver our projects is just as important as what we deliver. Every step of the way, we know that we have to do it the right way. Can we go to the next slide, please? So our offshore wind projects are responsibly developed in close collaboration with stakeholders on the ground to ensure minimal potential impacts to wildlife and local communities. We ensure that thorough, extensive environmental and social impacts evaluation. We ensure minimal potential impacts to fishing areas and wildlife. We ensure thorough, consistent engagement with local fisheries, and we have full-time members of the team devoted solely to that effort. And we also prioritize the mitigation of any potential interference with coastal defense and radar. And we do that through close collaboration with the Bureau of Energy Management and the Department of Defense. So I want to introduce somebody who's been fighting for the environment on Long Island for a long time. We'll keep the introduction short so we can keep the program moving. I'd like to turn it over to Adrian Esposito from Windworks Long Island Citizens Campaign for the Environment.
Thank you, everyone. I am not with Equinor. As was said by Harrison, I'm with Citizens Campaign for the Environment. And why are we here? We're here because we've actually worked for the last 2 decades to bring offshore wind to a reality here on Long Island and also throughout New York State. Next slide. One of the reasons that offshore wind is important, as you know, is because climate change is real. Okay, it's science-based, temperature really is going up. And even if you don't want to believe in climate change, okay, you actually want to believe in things like energy independence. The fact that there's less pollution emanating from offshore wind than there is oil and gas and coal. So there are many reasons to move and transition away from fossil fuels to a clean, renewable power source. Next slide. However, our federal government has been hard at work. And one of the things about climate change is Long Island, as we all know, and you guys know it better than anybody living in Island Park, is we're an island on Long Island. We're literally on the front lines of climate change for its impacts. This particular map here shows the worst case scenario by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They have the worst name of any federal agency. But really what they show is that the flooding as sea level rises can be quite devastating to our coastal communities. So our impetus and our need to change is real. Next slide. All right. So people ask me all the time, why offshore wind? Why do we need it? Well, I just want you to know before I talk about this slide is New York State passed a law in 2019 mandating that we reduce our carbon dioxide output. And so now we need to figure out, how do we do that? And one way we do that is by transitioning from fossil fuels to offshore wind. Some people think offshore wind is new. It's not new. This is not new. Europe, as you can see right now, produces 28,000 megawatts of power with wind. That's a lot of power. They say 1 megawatt is about 1,000 homes. So, or maybe more than that. More? Harrison's giving me the eyeball. I don't know what it means. I don't read eyeballs. But anyway, okay. So there's Europe, 28,000. What do you think is the next country? The next one is a country, not a continent, that uses offshore wind. I heard Germany. I heard Russia. Oh, all right. There's a smarty in every crowd. Yes, it is China. Next slide. China, who's not known for their, pro-environmental, actions, but they had 2 goals. One is they do have a lot of air quality problems and challenges. particularly in the cities. And also they wanted to move more towards in the direction of energy independence. They're using 27,000 megawatts of wind power, offshore wind power. Now, what about America? You got Europe at 28,000, you got China at 27,000. Just yell out some guesses. How much power for offshore wind is offshore wind generating for America? I hear 6, 1,000, 2,000. Next slide. There's America, right up there, except we're missing a bunch of zeros. 42 megawatts, and most of that is coming from a little tiny wind farm off of Rhode Island. And then the other 2 wind turbines are just really like tiny, tiny little turbines down in Virginia, that is. So we have some catching up to do. So the point I wanted to make with you is it's not new technology. There are a whole host of studies that have been done in Europe over the last 2 decades that we will be using to answer many of the community's questions. So while CCE supports offshore wind, we also support doing it with a rigorous environmental review process and with lots of input from the public and the community. You know the community best, particularly when it comes to routing the cable or what the community needs, and that's a really significant, meaningful, important part of this process. And that's one of the roles that we play, is that we make sure that all of these wind farms, because, is there a next slide or did I cut it? Oh no, there is one. All of these wind farms are going through a rigorous process. It's not just happening here with Empire Wind 1 and 2, as you can see there, but if you move to the east, you'll see the Sunrise Wind Project, you'll see Beacon Wind, the South Fork Wind Project. So far, there are 5 wind projects selected that'll be off of Long Island's coast. And then there's another, it's called an RFP, request for proposal, out, and NYSERDA, New York State, will be deciding on several more. And you can see it'll be somewhere, on the South Shore, off the South Shore, but far off the South Shore. So this is, again, not new. New York is catching up to nations around the globe. And it is actually an historical moment. It's an historical moment when you can transition from the energy source, which we've been addicted to since the Industrial Revolution, to something that's cleaner, safer, and generated right here in America. So thank you so much for coming today, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
All right, thank you for that, Adrian. So I'll pick up where I left off with a little bit more of that context. So specifically about our projects in the state of New York, Empire Wind being the one more of focus to Island Park. So the Empire and Beacon Wind projects, which you can see up there, they're a 50-50 joint venture between Equinor and BP, with Equinor as the operator. And we're honored to have been chosen by New York State to supply clean and local offshore wind energy to the largest population center on the East Coast. So the projects you could see here in red are those projects. So Empire Wind 1, which connects into Brooklyn, Empire Wind 2, which connects into Long Island, and Beacon Wind 1, which connects all the way into Astoria. So today's presentation, as I said, is going to focus on Empire Wind 2. And as part of our commitment to the region, Equinor will also invest in workforce and economic development initiatives, as well as supporting regional environmental monitoring and research. Those are those figures that you could see on the right of the screen. And we're very early in setting the process for identifying and managing these investments, but we look forward to engaging the public more and more in settings just like this and beyond, and what we're going to do into the next year and into the future as these take shape in the coming months. Let's go to the next slide, please. So in addition, there's a tremendous effort ongoing to invest in ports and supply chains in the state. We're helping to ensure that New York becomes the manufacturing hub domestically for the entire offshore wind industry in the US, and capturing the development potential from this industry locally in New York. We're part of key efforts at the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. That's where our staging facility is going to be, and our long-term operations and maintenance hub is going to be. We're procuring components from the Port of Albany, domestically manufactured components. All of these efforts have tangible economic benefits. You can see right on the slide how many jobs, both short-term and long-term, these two facilities alone are going to support. Both ports will employ New Yorkers to assemble components for wind projects up and down the coast. And in addition to the port and supply chain piece of our work, we're also committed to building the workforce of the future to support this growing industry and working with local partners to make sure that we do it right. Let's go to the next slide. So it's a lot of numbers here, and I kind of want to break down all of it and specifically how it impacts everyone on the ground. And I include myself in that category as a Long Islander. So the US electricity grid, and by that I mean power lines, I mean substations, and supporting equipment, has not been systematically updated or modernized in the past 50 years. The grid, and particularly in our region, is in need of investment to improve resiliency and reliability. And this is regardless of whether offshore wind is developed or not. Increasing volatile weather, so hotter weather, which leads to an increase in summer demand, are stressing the system while at the same time is making the system more vulnerable. And it's a double whammy because climate change is leading to more extreme events, which impact the grid and ratepayers physically and economically, and storm cost recovery is passed on to ratepayers. So in addition to updating the grid, older generation power plants are being replaced by cleaner resources. And these investments and this development all provide increased energy security and reliability. We saw that risk earlier this year from the volatility from the war in Ukraine and what it did to energy prices. I just saw a story in the news yesterday about how some estimates say that costs could rise on our energy bills 30 to 40%. Local production of electricity can help to mitigate perceived and real security risks, and it can also mitigate the cost and risk of importing electricity or fuels. The bottom line is that in the long run, reduction in these risks translates into more efficient and stable pricing. Offshore wind isn't just a solution to this, but it's an opportunity to improve overall reliability and ultimately provide more local control and benefit to all of us here. Producing our own power for New York in New York provides more transparency and control over energy sources and costs. It allows us Long Islanders to meet our power needs locally, while at the same time benefiting our local communities. Offshore wind costs include necessary grid updates, which need to happen anyway, and significant economic and climate benefits, which conventional generation do not have. Not upgrading our electrical grid and not replacing conventional generation will increase risks, decrease resiliency, increase negative community impacts, and ultimately impact ratepayer costs. So in other words, as I said, doing nothing has costs too. So on the other hand, offshore wind has a multitude of positive benefits. The power from our projects is the equivalent of removing 1.3 million cars from the road every year. It will result in $2 billion in health benefits in the form of avoided hospitalization and premature death associated with asthma and respiratory illness. And it will lead to jobs and billions of dollars in economic benefit, as New York contractors will do a lot of the work to rebuild the grid. So putting aside all of the benefits toward climate goals, which there are many, these are necessary investments, and doing nothing is not an option. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Susan to get into more of the specifics of our project and how it works on the ground.
Okay. Well, thank you, Harrison. And as Harrison said, this is an opportunity for us to share about the Empire Wind Project, but it's also an opportunity from us to hear from you. So I just want to put out a reminder, everyone has those index cards. As we go through the next portion of the presentation, if you have questions, please write them down. We are going to have them guide our discussion a little bit later. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so how does offshore wind work? So the New York Bight area, which is the area between New York and New Jersey, has some of the world's best offshore wind resources. That wind blows stronger and more consistently offshore than it does on land. It's close to populated areas. Importantly, offshore wind provides energy where and when we need it. So wind blows strongest during the peak hours of energy use, which are in the morning when we're all getting up, getting ready for work, and in the evening when we're coming home, cooking dinner, putting the news on, watching TV. So this diagram here illustrates pretty generally how it all works, right? So starting with the offshore turbines, which capture those strong winds and convert it to clean, zero emissions electricity, which is carried through a series of cables to an offshore substation, which is then carried to the land to a substation where it's then distributed into our grid. Next slide. So the Empire Wind Project is an 80,000 acre lease area, approximately 15 to 30 miles off the south shore of Long Island. As Harrison noted earlier, it's being developed in 2 phases. Empire Wind 1, which will connect into the grid in South Brooklyn, and Empire Wind 2, which will connect into the grid up at the Barrett's Power Station. The total project will include 147 wind turbines and 2 offshore substations. There will also be up to 260 nautical miles of inter-array cable, which is the cables between the turbines, and up to 66 nautical miles of submarine export cables, which is the cable going from the offshore farm to the land. Next slide. So here we have our preferred cable route, which is the one that's highlighted in blue. This route has been selected following a thorough review of 5 potential sites. So we've conducted geological and marine surveys, as well as surveys of the existing infrastructure. And we've also incorporated feedback from the community to select this route. There are outside, when we break to the open house, big maps of this blown up so you can see down to each street throughout Long Beach and throughout Island Park where the cable route is, because I know this is a little tricky to see. So once on shore, the transmission cables will run underground through Long Beach, will cross under Reynolds Channel through the horizontal directional drill process, and then it will continue up along the Long Island Railroad right-of-way through Island Park to the point of interconnection, which is up in Oceanside. All the cables will be underground. There is a small portion where it crosses over Barnum's Channel where it won't be underground. And then there'll be one onshore substation built here in the village of Island Park at the former Pop's restaurant site. And of course, we anticipate there's going to be many questions about the right-of-way as well as on construction as we move forward. I just want to remind everyone we are still very early in the process of developing those construction plans and the different engineering designs. But we will be continually engaging in the community throughout the process through meetings like this and meeting with smaller organizations around the community. Next slide. Okay, so for the substation, again, we're very early in that design process, so we don't have a rendering of the substation for the Island Park site just yet, but we do know that aesthetics and access to the waterfront are important to the community. So as we continue forward, we look forward to continuing the conversation as we develop that design in the months to come. But I did want to share a picture of what a substation, an Equinor substation, does look like. So this is an example here of the design for Empire Wind 1 substation, which is in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Next slide. Okay, so moving along, I have Sue Davis here from our permitting team, and I'd like to ask her to take a few minutes and walk through the permitting processes that the project is going through and to share a little bit of how you can become involved.
Thanks, Susan. So as you can see from this slide, the permitting process is a long road from start to point where we can begin construction and fabrication. The project areas were, the lease areas were obtained in 2017, and they, the surveys have been ongoing for a number of years. Currently, we're in the stage where both the federal and the state processes of permitting are ongoing, and there is a lot of opportunity within both to have public input, which I'll talk about a little bit. There are regular federal and state permitting processes to develop the most environmentally and socially responsible project. The project has to meet various regulations like the Coastal Zone Management Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, Migratory Bird Treaty Act, National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, Magnuson-Stevens Act that governs marine fisheries management. We also consult with state historic preservation offices and representatives of federally recognized Native American tribes. BOEM, or the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, oversees the federal regulatory process, and the Public Service Commission oversees the state Article 7 process. Like I mentioned, there are many opportunities to engage as the public in both of them. Next slide, please. So the state Article 7 process, the Article 7 was enacted in 1970 to establish a review process for any proposal to construct and operate a major transmission infrastructure project. It evaluates the purpose and need and environmental impacts of transmission infrastructure, allowing the public to comment on those proposed plans. Empire filed our Article 7 application for Empire Wind 2 in June of 2022. Currently, the Public Service Commission, or the PSC, is evaluating that Article 7 application to determine when it decides it's complete and meets the regulations for moving forward in the evaluation process. Once they find it's complete to meet all those the statutes and requirements, we will move on to the next step, and that does include public statement hearings on the application, which will happen probably about 60 to 90 days after the application is deemed complete. During those public statement hearings, the public will have the opportunity to speak, to weigh in with support or any questions or concerns that they might have. We are expecting at this point, we hope, I should say, that application completeness might be coming in even by the end of this year. So look for the first 3 months or so of 2023 to probably have those public statement hearings. The way you can find out specifically when they are, there will be notices issued and all of that. But if you wanted to have a direct insight into what's going on with that process, on the DPS website, which is on the slide in the bottom, I know it's probably hard to read. You can go on the website and register to be on the service list to get all of email notifications of anything that's filed in the case. The case number is also up there on the bottom of the slide. I know it's hard to read and it might be confusing. If anybody has any questions more specifically on how to go about getting signed up to do that, let me know later when we're out during the open house, and I'm happy to kind of go through that in more detail. Next slide, please. On the federal permitting process, BOEM actually just recently issued the draft environmental impact statement, and it's available for public comment. It was issued on November 18th of this year. The DEIS covers all aspects of the project and assesses the relative impact to the environment, all aspects of the environment. BOEM is expected to issue the final EIS in late 2023, and with all federal permits expected in early 2024. Some of these additional federal permits include, again, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, incidental take authorization, Outer Continental Shelf Air Permit from the Clean Air Act, Section 10 Rivers and Harbors Act, and Section 404 Clean Waters Act. And there is upcoming opportunity for public involvement in the federal permitting process. The public hearings on the DEIS will actually take place this month. They will be virtual, and BOEM has released the dates as being on December 7th, December 13th, and December 15th. They're back on the permitting area during the open house. We do have flyers that have information available on those dates, and also what the process is to register to be able to attend those virtual public hearings, as well as how to go about issuing public comments or statements on the federal permitting process. You can do like written. You don't have to attend specifically those open houses. There are other ways to submit written comments. So again, we can help you guys out with that later. If you want to follow the permitting milestones and schedule for the project, they are located on the FAST 41 website, which is the website that is up there on the slide. Next.
Thank you, Sue. So before I share some exciting news, and trust me, this is like my favorite part of this whole presentation, I want to have my team walk around and collect those question cards, because after this, we will get into that thoughtful discussion. So I want to make sure that everyone had a chance to submit their cards. So I'm just going to pause for a second. It's like a drum roll. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so it is with great excitement and enthusiasm that I can announce that Equinor will be the proud sponsor of this year's Village of Island Park Holiday Festival. So we are super excited and delighted to partner with the village and to participate in this incredible afternoon of holiday celebration. So this year there's going to be holiday activities, themed activities. There's an ice skating rink. There'll be a heated tent with hot chocolate and cookies to go around. We will have Toys for Tots will be there collecting new and unwrapped toys. The Equinor team, of course, will be there. We'll be there to share some information about the project, of course, but also there to share in all the holiday cheer with everyone in the community. So the event is happening on December 17th from noon to 4 o'clock. It will be on the Village Green here in Island Park. And I really do hope to see everyone there and to hopefully take a lap around the ice skating rink with everyone. In addition, I do encourage everyone to sign up for project updates and to follow Empire Wind on our social media channels. If you have something you'd like to share with us, you can call the info line. It's available on the website. You can also send an email, empirewind@equinor.com. And of course, I always look forward to seeing everyone around town at the festivals and at the various local businesses. Carrie Ann and I are here quite regularly, several days a week, actually. We have very many meals around town. So if any of you see us, I do encourage you to come over and say hello to us. All right. So again, thank you everyone for your interest and attention throughout the presentation. At this point, I want to open things up for that thoughtful discussion with the team before we break out to that open house. So Harrison, you have your cards? Everyone handed their cards in? And I'm going to turn it over to Harrison, so he will use that to guide the discussion.
Thank you, everybody. On more cards. So we're sifting through because a lot of people are asking the same questions, so we want to make sure that we're very streamlined with making sure the appropriate expert is on hand to answer it. So I want to go to the first one that, I think a lot of the people locally, and we're seeing it in the cards, they're asking, how does this project affect the Barrett power plant? So Ben Hughes from our team, if Ben, could you just introduce yourself one more time, say what you do, and then if you could take that question.
So hello again, I'm Ben Hughes. I'm an electrical engineer for Equinor. So the Barrett power station, well, I guess let's say Barrett is two things, right? So there's the Barrett substation, and then there's the Barrett power plants. So those Barrett power plants are not affiliated with Equinor, so that will be the decision of National Grid, whether they continue to operate those or not. The Barrett substation is owned by LIPA, Long Island Power Authority, and operated by PSEG Long Island. That substation is part of the transmission network in this area. That will remain and will continue to operate and will be expanded as part of this project.
All right, thanks, Ben. So the next question, and I'm seeing multiples of this. The town of East Hampton received $29 million in community benefits for easements and permits for an offshore project with 15 windmills. What is fair compensation for the easements and permits that are going to be required for this project? So Emil from our commercial team, same. Could you do an introduction and give an answer to that?
Hey, Emil Yeset, I'm working as commercial manager for the project. So we are still we're assessing, both from an easement perspective and also from a still not. okay, we're still assessing from an easement perspective and a community benefit perspective, you know, what is the right approach for the project. You know, we're working on setting up a proper framework for those investments. We're also working, as was said earlier in the presentation, on the design of the cable route and the design of the project to understand the impacts to the community. And we're also working through events like this to gather, you know, input and also input and you know, different responses from the community around, you know, what are the concerns and what are the things that, you know, you guys think are important. So while we're not ready to kind of say, you know, what's that number at the end of the day, we are working on that, and we're also going to be involving, you know, the representatives of the various municipalities and also the communities in that final response. So.
All right. Thank you, Emil. All right, so the next one, and I'm going to go to Harriet from our team for this. So when do you expect the wind farm to be operational? So Harriet, if you could do an introduction and answer that.
Thanks, Harrison. Yeah, Harriet Green, Operations Manager. So when the wind farm becomes operational, there's different dates that we target. So some of it is around when we actually start producing power. Some of that is around when we expect the total wind farm to be complete. And there is a transition between the two. So once we have enough of the infrastructure in place and we start installing turbines and we can start producing power, technically we consider that the start of commercial operations. And we are expecting to start that actual physical construction work offshore towards the end of 2026. That process will then continue for both Empire Wind 1 and Empire Wind 2. It is not quick getting all of these large turbines in the water, so it'll be over the next 1 to 2 years that we will continue to further expand the number of megawatts that our project is producing until we have fully installed all of the wind turbines, as you saw the numbers on the slides earlier.
Thank you, Harriet. We're going to keep moving through them. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. And of course, the ones that we don't get to, we're going to be staying out by the posters. We're happy to take all your questions tonight. So the next question, I'm going to call up my colleague Ben one more time. So another question, and we've seen this one a couple of times. Why do you need a substation in Island Park if the cable is going to run up to the Barrett plant?
Okay, so engineers love pictures, so maybe we could flip back in the slides to that sort of overview of the wind farm. Keep going. That one. Okay, thank you. So the question was, what is the purpose of the substation in Island Park? So if we start with offshore, you can see we have an offshore substation, and that's where we collect the power from all the turbines. And there we step up the voltage, and stepping up the voltage is critical to being able to transmit the power long distances subsea. Now, when we hit the land and we go to Island Park substation, we will then transform up again. So we'll go to a higher voltage. And so we need that equipment at our substation. We also need the plant controls. We need power quality, and we need other compensation equipment. And all of this together helps us meet the grid spec, and we as a developer are obligated to meet this grid spec, so it has to be in our facility, not within the transmission facility that LiPo owns. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ben. So this one, how does Equinor respond to studies that prove offshore wind farms change the marine environment in ways such as altering the distribution of phytoplankton and zooplankton, the biomass of the waters around the wind farm, reducing the oxygen levels in the ocean? So Eva from our permitting team, why don't we bring you up for that?
Hello, I'm Eva Land, Federal Permit Manager. And we take all of these studies there's two parts to this, actually maybe even three parts. We've done initial studies of the area and surveys of our own in the offshore lease area. And we're also working with scientists at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, it's hard to say, WHO is easier, and the New York Aquarium. And they're doing their own studies as well in our lease area. But as far as existing studies in our construction and operation plan that's been incorporated into the draft environmental impact statement that is publicly available now, you can review the studies. Both the construction and operation plan and the draft environmental impact statement are available on BOEM's website. And we've taken a look at all of the available data. And from the data that's out there, we're assessing our impact. And if there is a measurable effect in the area, we will do ongoing studies actually for both benthic resources as well as the marine wildlife. So hopefully we'll have a better understanding actually for the whole scientific community.
Thank you, Eva. So these questions, a lot of them have multiple parts. So this one here, I would have be the last one of this, and then we're gonna move to the outside, to the open house, and we'll be able to take your questions there. So here's the final question for this part of the program. So for the Island Park property, POPs, will there be a pilot for this substation, or will they pay taxes equal to what POPs was paying in taxes or possibly more? During the presentation at the Long Beach Chamber of Commerce, you indicated $52 million allotted for community benefits. What calculation is that based on? So Emil spoke to that before as the broad number, but Steve from our team, why don't you take the first one about the pilot?
Good evening, everybody. Stephen Mark from a model law group where we work with Equinor in interfacing with the local communities and local municipalities. In response to the question about whether or not there's going to be a pilot, Equinor is considering a pilot, and they're in the process of assessing the different factors that would go into that. But the one thing that we could say is that even with the pilot, the tax payments would still be greater than what's currently paid on the POPs property. And the payments under the pilot would then go up annually over the course of 25 years. And then after 25 years would be in full tax payments.
All right, thank you for that. So the other thing too, if you have a phone, I want you to take a picture of these two emails. If you still have questions, reach out to us. We're still gonna be here for the open house, but this is the beginning of the conversation. So thank you, everybody, and let's move to the next part of the program. I'd ask our experts to go to your stations, and thank you so much for being here tonight.